5,000 characters. That is all it took. Somewhere in ancient China, more than 2,000 years ago, an old man sat down at a mountain pass and wrote 5,000 characters on strips of bamboo. When he was finished, he handed the bundle to a gatekeeper, climbed onto the back of a water buffalo, and disappeared into the west. No one ever saw him again. Those 5,000 characters became the most translated book in human history after the Bible. More than 250 versions in English alone. Scholars in every century, poets, philosophers, emperors, monks in mountain temples, scientists in modern laboratories, all of them drawn back again and again to these quiet, paradoxical words. The book is called the Tao Te Ching, the classic of the way and its virtue, and the old man, if he ever existed at all, was called Lao Tzu, the old master. The first English translation appeared in 1868, produced by a Scottish missionary named John Chalmers. Since then, the translations have never stopped. Since the 1990s, nearly 5 new English versions have appeared every single year. Each translator finds something different in the text. Each generation reads it through new eyes, and yet the words themselves remain quiet, patient, unchanged. The 81 chapters of this little book have shaped the course of an entire civilization. From its verses grew Taoism itself, a philosophy and a religion that influenced Chinese art, medicine, martial arts, poetry, and governance for more than 2 millennia. Its images of water and valleys and uncarved wood became the foundation of an entire way of seeing the world. Its paradoxes became proverbs. Its silence became a kind of music. And the book was born from a single extraordinary scene. An old man on a water buffalo at a narrow mountain pass called Hanggu, where the dusty road narrowed between steep cliffs and the wind funneled through the gap like a long, slow breath. Legend tells us Lao Tzu had served for decades as the royal archivist of the Zhou dynasty, a keeper of ancient records in the imperial court, quiet and largely unnoticed. But as the dynasty crumbled around him, as corruption and war spread through the kingdom like weeds through a neglected garden, the old philosopher decided he had seen enough. He packed nothing. He climbed onto the back of his water buffalo and set out toward the western frontier, toward the mountains and the silence beyond. A gatekeeper who would not let him leave without writing down what he knew. The smell of ink ground on stone, the scratch of a brush on bamboo, the cool mountain air carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, the light of late afternoon slanting gold through the pass, and from that quiet moment 5,000 characters that would echo across the centuries. Tonight, we are going to follow the thread of this extraordinary text. We will walk through the mountain pass where it was written. We will sit with its most beautiful verses and let them wash over us like water over smooth stones. We will meet the philosopher who called Lao Tzu a dragon, and the gatekeeper who refused to let him leave without writing down what he knew. There is nothing you need to remember, nothing to hold on to, just a voice and one of the oldest, gentlest books ever written. Let your breathing slow. Let the weight of the day begin to dissolve, and let the Tao carry you wherever it goes. One writer called it the most lovable of all the great religious texts, and that is a good word for it, lovable. It does not demand or threaten or insist. It whispers, it suggests, it points at the moon and then steps quietly out of the way. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. These are the opening words, and they tell you right from the beginning that the most important things cannot be captured in language. They can only be felt, the way you feel the warmth of sunlight on your face, or the quiet pull of sleep at the end of a long day. Darkness within darkness, Lao Tzu wrote, the gateway to all understanding. And so we begin in the darkness, moving gently toward understanding. We begin with the man himself, or rather with the mystery of who he was. His name was not really a name. Lao Tzu simply means the old master, or perhaps the old child. The Chinese characters allow for both, and there is something fitting in that ambiguity, because almost everything about him exists in a space between certainty and legend. According to Taoist legend, Lao Tzu was no ordinary man from the very beginning. His mother carried him in her womb not for 9 months, but 81 years. When he was finally born, some say his mother was leaning against a plum tree at the time. The infant emerged with snow-white hair and a long white beard, already bearing the face of an old man, and so they called him Lao Tzu, which can mean both old master and old child. His birth name, according to the historian Sima Qian, was Li Er. His surname, Li, which means plum. His given name, which means ear, suggesting perhaps large or distinctive ears. He came from the village of Kuoren in the southern state of Chu, a land of flat alluvial plain threaded with rivers, a place of millet fields and mulberry groves in ancient times. The earliest account we have comes from Sima Qian, writing around 100 BCE, roughly 400 years after Lao Tzu supposedly lived. Sima Qian was meticulous. He was the grand historian of the Han dynasty, a man who spent his life collecting facts. But when he came to write about Lao Tzu, even he seemed unsure. He offered 3 possible identities. The first was a man called Lao Dan, who served as an archivist in the royal court of the Zhou dynasty, a keeper of records, a man who spent his days surrounded by ancient bamboo scrolls in a vast dim archive where dust motes floated in shafts of pale light, and the only sounds were the soft clicking of bamboo strips and the distant murmur of court ceremonies. Imagine that life for a moment. Day after day, surrounded by the accumulated wisdom of centuries, reading the words of kings and sages who had long since turned to dust. The archive was no minor place. The archivist of the Zhou court was a custodian of oracle bone records, bronze vessel inscriptions, ritual texts, diplomatic correspondence, the accumulated knowledge of centuries of statecraft. To hold this position meant deep learning, access to rare texts, and proximity to power. And all the while, watching the dynasty slowly decay around him, the rituals growing hollow, the court ceremonies becoming performances rather than genuine expressions of virtue. Officials schemed for power, the common people suffered, and a quiet understanding was forming in the mind of this old archivist that something had gone wrong, that the more rules people created, the further they drifted from the way. The second possibility Sima Qian mentioned was a man called Lao Tzu, a hermit who lived in the southern state of Chu, known as one of the 24 filial exemplars, paragons of devotion to one's parents. The third was a royal astronomer named Tai Shi Dan, who may have lived a century later. Sima Qian could not say for certain which of these men, if any, was the true Lao Tzu. Modern scholars have pushed the uncertainty further. Some have stated bluntly that Sima Qian's account contains virtually nothing that is demonstrably factual. The emerging consensus, supported by archaeological discoveries, is that the Tao Te Ching was likely the work of multiple authors and editors over hundreds of years, rather than the achievement of a single individual. And this is perhaps the most Taoist thing about the Tao Te Ching. The author of the book about letting go of names and categories has himself let go of a fixed identity. He exists as a whisper, a suggestion, a figure disappearing around a bend in a mountain path. Whether Lao Tzu was one person, 3 people, or a philosophical tradition personified, the name continues to stand for a particular vision of wisdom, quiet, yielding, paradoxical, and profound. What we do know, or what the tradition tells us, is that the world Lao Tzu inhabited was falling apart. This was the period known as the Warring States, roughly the 5th through 3rd centuries BCE. The great Zhao dynasty that had unified China for centuries was crumbling. 7 powerful states fought endlessly for dominance. Armies of hundreds of thousands clashed on open plains. Villages burned. Families were scattered. The scale of warfare was staggering. Peasant farmers were conscripted into armies, torn from their fields. The old aristocratic codes of combat gave way to mass infantry warfare and ruthless tactical innovation. It was into this chaos that the great Chinese philosophical traditions were born. 100 schools of thought, all trying to answer the same desperate question: how should we live? How do we restore order to a world that has lost its way? Confucius said, through ritual, through duty, through respect for hierarchy and tradition, through careful study of the ancient ways. Lao Tzu, if we can trust the legends, said something very different. He said, "Stop trying so hard. The harder you push, the further away you get. The way back to harmony is not through more effort, it is through less." The most famous story about Lao Tzu is the story of how his book came to be written. And like all the best stories, it begins with someone leaving. The legend says that Lao Tzu grew weary. He had watched the Zhao dynasty decline for decades. He had seen virtue replaced by ritual, sincerity replaced by performance, wisdom replaced by cleverness. The rituals that once held society together were becoming empty gestures. And one day he decided he had seen enough. He mounted a water buffalo, a slow, patient animal with dark, gentle eyes, and he turned his face toward the west. Not a horse, not a fine carriage, a water buffalo. The choice was deliberate, or perhaps it was simply natural. The water buffalo does not rush. It does not strain against its burden. It moves with the steady, unhurried rhythm of the earth itself. He was heading for the mountains, for the wilderness beyond the civilization. He was going to disappear. He did not announce his departure. He did not seek a farewell ceremony. He simply left. And the old man and his buffalo began their long, slow journey toward the western mountains, along dusty roads that wound through villages and fields. But to leave the kingdom, he had to pass through a narrow gap in the mountains called Hangu Pass. And at this pass there was a gatekeeper. Picture this place, a stone defile, barely wide enough for a cart, cutting through mountains that rose like walls on either side. Limestone cliffs closing in on both sides, the road narrowing, the sky shrinking to a ribbon overhead. The yellow river churned somewhere below, catching the light like hammered bronze. Wind funneled through the gap, carrying the smell of wild sage and pine resin. Above, the sky was a narrow ribbon of blue between the cliffs. Guard towers overlooked the road. Beyond the pass, the road opened into the vast Guangdong Plain, the heartland of the Qin state. The gatekeeper's name was Yin Shi. Some versions say he was an astronomer, a man who watched the stars. And the story tells us that Yin Shi saw something remarkable as the old man approached, a purple cloud drifting from the east. In Chinese tradition, purple clouds are an omen. They mean that something sacred is coming. Yin Shi climbed a tower to watch and saw the old man on his water buffalo moving slowly through the valley below. Yin Shi recognized Lao Tzu. He knew who this old man was, and he knew that if he let him pass without saying a word, the wisdom of the greatest sage alive would vanish into the mountains forever. So he blocked the path with quiet determination. "Before you go," he said, "write down what you know. You are about to retire into seclusion. I cannot let you pass. Not yet, not until you have written down your wisdom for those of us who will remain behind." And Lao Tzu, this man who believed that the Tao which can be spoken is not the true Tao, agreed. Perhaps he saw the sincerity in the gatekeeper's eyes. Perhaps he understood that some things must be written down, even if words can never quite capture them. Perhaps the water buffalo simply needed a rest. He sat down. Imagine the scene. A small room facing south, with wooden beams crisscrossing overhead. Before him, on a low table, bamboo slips, narrow strips of dried bamboo, each the width of a finger and the length of a forearm, smooth and pale, with a faint natural grain, a brush of animal hair bundled into a bamboo handle, an inkstone, a carved slab of fine-grained stone with a shallow well, a stick of ink made from compressed lamp-black and pine soot. He ground the ink stick slowly against the wet stone, the ink gradually darkening, the scent of pine soot rising faintly. The brush dipped, excess ink touched off against the stone's edge, the first character laid down, the pressure of the brush tip on bamboo, the slight resistance of the grain, each stroke deliberate, the wet ink glistening for a moment before it soaked into the bamboo and dried to matte black. The only sounds, the soft grinding of ink on stone, the scratch of brush on bamboo, the wind through the pass outside, distant bird song.
And over the course of, some say, a single night, some say several days, he wrote 5,000 characters on those strips of bamboo, 81 short chapters, the first half about the Tao, the way, the second half about Te, virtue or power, together the Tao Te Ching. Then he handed the bamboo strips to In-See, climbed back onto his water buffalo, and rode through the gate into the mountains. The purple cloud followed him, and that was the last anyone ever heard of the old master. No one was able to tell who he really was. No one knew where he went in the end. He simply vanished, like mist burning away in the morning sun, like water absorbed into the earth. Whether any of this happened, we cannot say. The story may be entirely legendary, but it does not matter, because the book is real, the words are real, and they have been carried forward by every generation since, like a river that keeps flowing long after the mountain snow that started it has melted away.
If there is one image that runs through the Tao Te Ching like a thread through silk, it is water. Lao Tzu returns to water again and again, in at least 10 chapters directly, and throughout the entire text by implication. Water is his supreme teacher, his most important metaphor. And when you understand why, you begin to understand the entire book. The highest goodness is like water, he wrote. Water benefits all things and does not compete. It gathers in the low places that everyone else avoids. That is why it is so close to the Tao. One translator rendered it this way: true goodness is like water. Water's good for everything. It doesn't compete. It goes right to the low, loathsome places, and so finds the way. Think about water for a moment. A mountain stream flowing down a hillside, clear water moving over smooth stones, each stone visible through the current. The water is cold, snow melt from above. It makes a continuous, multi-layered sound, the deep murmur of the main flow, the higher timpling where it breaks over rocks, the hollow gurgling where it passes under a stone ledge. The stream does not plan its route. It does not force its way through rock. It simply flows, finding the path of least resistance, moving around obstacles rather than through them. And yet, given enough time, water carves the deepest canyons on earth. The Grand Canyon, that vast chasm in the American desert, was carved not by force, but by patience, by water doing nothing more than being water for millions of years, drop by drop, year by year, millennium by millennium. This is the paradox at the heart of the Tao Te Ching. The soft overcomes the hard, the yielding overcomes the rigid. The gentle thing, given time, reshapes the world. Nothing in the world is as soft and yielding as water, Lao Tzu wrote. Yet for overcoming the hard and strong, nothing surpasses it. The weak overcomes the strong. The soft overcomes the hard. Everyone in the world knows this, yet no one puts it into practice. There is a gentleness in these words, no urgency, no demand that you change your life immediately, just a quiet observation, offered the way a friend might point out the moon through a window. And then in the same chapter where he praises water, Lao Tzu offers something extraordinary, a list of ways to live like water. In dwelling, live close to the ground. In thinking, keep to the simple. In conflict, be fair and generous. In governing, don't try to control. In work, do what you enjoy. In family life, be completely present. When you are content to be simply yourself and don't compare or compete, everybody will respect you. Each of these is water taking a different shape, adapting to the container of each life situation, while remaining essentially itself. Water is also humble. It always flows to the lowest point. It fills the valleys, the ditches, the places that no one values. And this too, Lao Tzu says, is wisdom. The great river and the sea are king of all the mountain streams because they lie below them. By being lower, they receive everything. Think about how different this is from the way we usually measure success. We admire people who rise, who climb, who reach the top. But Lao Tzu says, look at water, look at the valley, look at the ocean that sits lower than every river on earth, and yet every river flows to it. All streams flow to the sea because it is lower than they are. Humility gives it its power. What makes water such a radical teacher is that it embodies the opposite of everything the human ego values. The ego wants to be on top. Water flows to the bottom. The ego wants to be seen. Water is transparent. The ego wants to be solid and defined. Water takes the shape of whatever contains it. The ego wants to conquer. Water yields, and yet water wins, always. Given enough time, water defeats every obstacle, wears down every mountain, carves through every landscape. This is not weakness. This is a different kind of strength.
the strength that comes from not needing to prove anything, from being content to be what you are, where you are, from trusting that the natural flow of things will carry you exactly where you need to go. Let your mind rest on that image for a moment. A river flowing through a quiet valley in the moonlight, not hurrying, not straining, just moving the way it has always moved since the mountains first rose from the earth. And as the river flows, let your breathing flow with it, easy, unhurried, finding its own natural rhythm, the way water always does. There is a concept in the Tao Te Ching that is difficult to translate, but easy to feel. The Chinese word is pu. It means the uncarved block, a piece of wood in its natural state, before anyone has shaped it into something. Know the masculine, Lao Tzu wrote, but keep to the feminine. Be like a valley to the world. If you are a valley to the world, eternal virtue will never leave you, and you will return to the state of the uncarved block. The uncarved block, a piece of raw wood, rough and simple, not yet turned into a table or a sculpture or a tool, not yet given a name or a purpose or a label. The grain runs through it in patterns that no one planned. The bark is still on it. It smells of the forest. Lao Tzu saw something precious in this. He believed that we all begin as uncarved blocks. When we are very young, before the world has taught us what to want and what to fear and who to be, we exist in a state of natural simplicity. We are curious without agenda. We respond to things without calculation. We are, in the deepest sense, ourselves. Think of a newborn child. A baby does not worry about what others think of her. She does not compare herself to the child in the next room. She does not scheme for a better position. She experiences each moment with total openness, laughing when something delights her, crying when something hurts her, sleeping when she is tired. This is pu. This is the uncarved block. And then, slowly, the carving begins. We learn names for everything. We learn categories, good and bad, beautiful and ugly, success and failure. Parents teach the child what is acceptable and what is not. School teaches her to compete, to rank herself against others, to seek approval. Society teaches her to want things, the right clothes, the right career, the right body, the right life. We are shaped by education, by culture, by the expectations of others, and with each cut of the chisel, something of the original wood is lost. By adulthood, the block has been carved into a very specific shape, and the person inside that shape often feels a quiet sense of loss,
though she may not be able to name what has been lost. This is not Lao Tzu being naive about the world. He is not saying that ignorance is better than knowledge. He is saying something subtler. He is saying that beneath all the roles we play, beneath all the identities we construct, beneath all the wanting and worrying and performing, there is still an uncarved block, a simple, original nature that has never been touched. And the path of the Tao, if it can be called a path, is the path back to that simplicity. Not to become infants again, that would be impossible and foolish, but to return to a state of simplicity while carrying the wisdom of experience. "The 5 colors blind the eye," he wrote. "The 5 tones deafen the ear. The 5 flavors dull the taste. Racing through the field and hunting make the mind go mad. Rare goods impede our steps. Therefore the sage looks after the belly, not the eye, chooses what is within, not what is without." There is a story in the Taoist tradition about a master carpenter and a great oak tree. The carpenter passed the enormous tree without a glance. His apprentice was astonished. It was the largest tree they had ever seen, its trunk 100 spans around, its branches reaching 80 feet from the ground. But the carpenter said, "It is good for nothing. A boat made from its wood would sink, a coffin would rot, a tool would split. And that," the carpenter said, "is precisely why it has reached such a ripe old age. Every man knows how useful it is to be useful. No one seems to know how useful it is to be useless." The uncarved block does not try to be anything. It does not advertise its usefulness. It simply exists in its natural state, complete and whole. Tonight, as you lie here, there is nothing you need to be. No role to play, no performance to give, no one watching, no one judging. Just you and the darkness and these quiet words. And if you can let the labels fall away, even for a few breaths, what remains is something very like the uncarved block, something simple, something whole, something that has been waiting patiently beneath all the carving all along. Of all the ideas in the Tao Te Ching, the one that confuses people most, and the one that may be most important, is Wu Wei. The words translate literally as non-action or not doing, but this is misleading. Wu Wei does not mean sitting in a chair and refusing to move. It does not mean laziness or passivity or indifference. It means something far more interesting. Wu Wei is action without force, effort without strain, doing without overdoing. It is the way a skilled musician plays a piece they have practiced 1,000 times, no longer thinking about where to place their fingers, simply letting the music happen. It is the way a bird rides a thermal, not flapping, not struggling, just adjusting its wings and rising. One translator put it beautifully. Nothing is done because the doer has wholeheartedly vanished into the deed. The fuel has been completely transformed into flame. This nothing is, in fact, everything. The Tao does nothing, Lao Tzu wrote, and yet nothing is left undone. Think about that. The Tao, the fundamental principle that governs the universe, accomplishes everything by doing nothing. The sun does not try to shine. The river does not try to flow. Spring does not try to make the flowers bloom. These things happen naturally, effortlessly, because they are aligned with the way. There is a famous story in the Taoist tradition about a cook named Ding. Cook Ding was cutting up an ox for a lord. At every touch of his hand, every heave of his shoulder, every move of his feet, the knife slithered along with a zing, and all was in perfect rhythm, as though he were performing a dance. The Lord was amazed, but Cook Ding said something surprising. "What I care about is the way, which goes beyond mere skill. When I first began cutting up oxen, all I could see was the ox itself. After 3 years, I no longer saw the whole ox. I began to see the spaces within it. And now I go at it by spirit, and do not look with my eyes. I follow things as they are. I strike in the big hollows, guide the knife through the big openings. I have had this knife for 19 years, and the blade is as good as the day it came from the grindstone. A good cook changes his knife once a year because he cuts. A mediocre cook changes his knife once a month because he hacks. But Cook Ding's knife passes through the spaces that already exist. Nothing is forced, nothing is broken. This is Wu Wei. Not the absence of action, but action so perfectly aligned with the natural order of things that it feels like no effort at all. Wu Wei is an invitation to live the same way, not to stop acting, but to stop forcing, not to abandon effort, but to abandon the kind of effort that comes from anxiety and ego and the desperate need to control outcomes. Lao Tzu uses the metaphor of governing a country to make his point. Governing a great state, he says, is like cooking a small fish. If you poke at it too much, it falls apart. The best ruler, the sage ruler, governs so lightly that the people barely know he exists. When his work is done, the people all say, "We did it ourselves." Do you have the patience to wait till your mud settles and the water is clear? He asks in another verse.
Can you remain unmoving till the right action arises by itself? The farmer who plants seeds in winter because he is impatient will harvest nothing. The farmer who waits for spring and works in rhythm with the seasons will have abundance. There is something deeply restful about Wu Wei. It is the opposite of the constant striving that fills most of our waking hours, the endless planning and worrying and pushing. Wu Wei says you do not need to push the river. The river is already flowing. Your job is not to direct it, but to stop standing in its way. The gentlest thing in the world, Lao Tzu wrote, overcomes the hardest thing in the world. That which has no substance enters where there is no space. This teaches the benefit of non-action. Few things under heaven are as instructive as the lessons of silence, or as beneficial as the fruits of non-action. And perhaps the most beautiful expression of Wu Wei is simply this: tonight, you do not need to do anything. You do not need to try to fall asleep. You do not need to try to relax. You do not need to try to stop thinking. Just let the words drift past you, the way clouds drift past the moon. Whatever happens is enough. There is a mysterious verse in the Tao Te Ching that has haunted readers for millennia. It speaks of something called the valley spirit. The valley spirit never dies, Lao Tzu wrote. It is called the mysterious female. The gateway of the mysterious female is the root of heaven and earth. Gossamer it is, barely existing, but draw upon it and it will never run dry. Different translators have heard different music in these words. One rendered it, "The spirit of the fountain dies not. It is called the mysterious feminine. The doorway of the mysterious feminine is called the root of heaven and earth. Lingering like gossamer, it has only a hint of existence. And yet, when you draw upon it, it is inexhaustible." Another heard it this way: "The valley spirit never dies. Call it the mystery, the woman. The mystery, the door of the woman, is the root of earth and heaven. Forever this endures, forever, and all its uses are easy." The valley spirit. What does it mean? A valley is an empty space between mountains. It is defined not by what is there, but by what is not there. The mountains are solid and impressive and visible from miles away, but the valley, the low, open, empty space between them, is where the water gathers, where the rivers begin, where the fertile soil collects, where the villages are built, and the crops grow, and life flourishes. Picture a deep mountain valley at dawn, the floor still in shadow, while the ridgeline above blazes with golden light. Mist pooled at the bottom, thick as cotton, slowly burning off as the sun climbs. The valley acts as an amphitheater. Sounds carry strangely. A bird call from the far ridge arrives clearly as if from just beside you. Streams flow into the valley from every side. All water finds its way down. The valley does not reach for the water. It simply waits, low and open. This is one of Lao Tzu's deepest insights. Emptiness is not nothing. Emptiness is potential. Emptiness is where things happen. He makes this point with a series of images that are among the most famous in all of philosophy. We join spokes together in a wheel, he says, but it is the center whole that makes the wagon move. We shape clay into a pot, but it is the inner space that makes it whole. We hammer wood for a house, but it is the inner space that makes it livable. We cut doors and windows into a room, but it is the holes that make the room useful. Therefore, having leads to profit, not having leads to use. One translator captured it with playful simplicity. 30 spokes meet in the hub. Where the wheel isn't is where it's useful. Hollowed out, clay makes a pot. Where the pot's not is where it's useful. Cut doors and windows to make a room. Where the room isn't, there's room for you. So the profit in what is in the use of what isn't. Think about a bowl. A beautiful ceramic bowl, glazed in deep blue. The sides are elegant, the form is pleasing, but the bowl's purpose, its function, is entirely in the space where there is no bowl, the emptiness inside. Without that emptiness, a bowl is just a lump of clay. Run your finger along the inside and feel the potter's handiwork, the slight ridges from the wheel, the glaze smooth as water. Think about a room. The walls and floor and ceiling are important, but what you actually use, what you actually live in, is the empty space between them. If the room were solid, it would be useless. An empty room with white walls, a single window, afternoon light falling through it in a broad, warm rectangle on the wooden floor. The room holds nothing, and therefore can hold anything. Think about silence. A piece of music is not just the notes, it is the spaces between the notes. Without silence, music is just noise. The pauses, the rests, the moments of emptiness are what give the melody its shape. Lao Tzu is gently suggesting that we have things backwards. We value what is solid and visible and full. We fill our houses with objects. We fill our calendars with appointments. We fill our minds with plans and worries and information. We fill every silence with a sound, every commute with a phone call, every evening with a screen, and we wonder why we feel so empty inside. Perhaps, the Tao Te Ching suggests, the emptiness we feel is not a problem to be solved. Perhaps it is the most valuable thing we have, the valley spirit, the space where new things can begin. True fullness comes from creating emptiness. When you clear your schedule, clarity appears. When you empty your mind of opinions, wisdom can enter. When you stop talking, you can finally hear. Tonight, you have nowhere to be, nothing to fill. The empty darkness around you is not absence, it is possibility. Rest in it, the way a valley rests between mountains, open, receptive, quietly alive. There is a story recorded in several ancient Chinese texts about the day Confucius met Lao Tzu. Whether it really happened, we cannot know for certain, but the story itself is too beautiful to leave untold. The year was approximately 518 BCE. Confucius was a young man, ambitious and brilliant, already gathering students and developing his philosophy of social harmony through ritual and duty. He had heard tales of a remarkable sage living in Luoyang, the capital of the Zhou dynasty, an old man named Lao Dan, the keeper of the imperial archives. It was said that Lao Dan knew the past and the present, understood the origins of rites and music, and grasped the deepest principles of morality. "He is my teacher," Confucius told his disciples, "and now I will go to meet him." He traveled to the Zhou capital to study the ancient ceremonies, and there, in the royal archives, he met the old archivist. The meeting of these two minds, Confucius and Lao Tzu, represents one of the great philosophical conversations in human history. Two entirely different answers to the same question. How should we live in a world that has lost its way? Confucius believed in culture, in education, in the careful study of the ancient rites. He believed that if people learned to behave properly, to fulfill their roles as parents and children and rulers and subjects, harmony would return. He was systematic, organized, earnest. He believed that the path to a good society was through more knowledge, more discipline, more structure. Every person had a place, the ruler above the subject, the father above the son. Elaborate rituals governed everything from court ceremonies to family dinners. Lao Tzu, according to the story, listened to all of this with patient silence, and then he said something that must have stung. "Give up your proud airs," he told Confucius. "Give up your many wishes and mannerisms and extravagant claims. They are of no use to you. That is all I have to say to you." In some versions of the story, a few days later, when Confucius prepared to take his leave, Lao Tzu takes him to the banks of the Yellow River, and there,
Watching the brown water flow endlessly toward the sea, he speaks more gently.
"The best of men is like water," he says. "Water benefits all things and does not compete with them. It dwells in the lowly places that all others disdain, and this is the very essence of modesty. Rivers and seas become the kings of all streams and valleys because they excel at taking the lower position. Nothing in the world is softer or weaker than water, and yet when it attacks the hard and the strong, nothing can surpass it." And then a parting warning. Clever individuals with profound insight often face trials and tribulations because they tend to discuss the rights and wrongs of others. The best merchant keeps his stores hidden so that he appears to possess nothing. The true gentleman conceals his abundant inner power beneath an appearance of foolishness. Rid yourself of your pride and your desire. Put aside your fancy manners. They will bring you nothing but harm. Confucius left the meeting shaken. He went back to his students and said something remarkable. He said, "Birds can fly, fish can swim, animals can run. For those that run, you can set a trap. For those that swim, you can cast a net. For those that fly, you can shoot an arrow. But a dragon rides the wind and the clouds into heaven. I cannot set a trap for a dragon. Today I met Lao Tzu, and he is like a dragon."
A dragon. Not an insult, not a dismissal, a declaration of awe. In Chinese culture, the dragon is the most exalted of all creatures, not the fire-breathing terror of European mythology, but a being of cosmic wisdom, power, and mystery. Confucius, the great systematizer, the man who believed that everything could be organized and understood, met something in Lao Tzu that defied his categories, something wild and ancient and free, something that could not be caught in a net of words or rules. And perhaps this is the deepest difference between the two. Confucius wanted to name everything, to categorize everything, to put the world in order through language and ritual. Lao Tzu wanted to remind us that the most important things cannot be named at all. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. And tonight, as these words settle around you like dust motes in still air, there is nothing you need to name, nothing you need to categorize. You can simply rest in the space that has no label, the way the dragon rests on the breath of the clouds.
Lao Tzu had a teacher too, or so the legend says,
And his teacher was not a person. His teacher was everything that is soft and yielding and quiet. When a person is born, he wrote, they are soft and supple. When they die, they are hard and stiff. When a plant is alive, it is green and flexible. When it dies, it is dry and brittle. Therefore, the hard and stiff are companions of death. The soft and yielding are companions of life. This is one of the most radical ideas in the Tao Te Ching, and it runs counter to almost everything we are taught. We are taught to be strong, to be firm, to stand our ground, to resist. We admire the oak tree for its strength. We admire the mountain for its endurance. But Lao Tzu says, look more carefully. In a great storm, which tree survives? The rigid oak or the supple willow that bends with the wind? Which lasts longer, the hard stone cliff or the soft water that wears it away? The teeth are hard and they break. The tongue is soft and it endures.
Consider the bamboo. In the forests of southern China, bamboo grows in groves so thick they resemble the columns of a cathedral. Pale green gold stalks rising perfectly straight, 10 to 20 meters high. The canopy overhead filters light into a soft green-gold glow. When a storm comes, the bamboo bends nearly to the ground. The wind howls through the grove, and the stalks flex and tap against each other, a gentle, irregular wooden percussion. The leaves rustle with a soft whispering. But when the storm passes, the bamboo springs back, unbroken. It bends, but it does not snap. And this is why bamboo is one of the four gentlemen of Chinese culture, a living metaphor for the Tao Te Ching's deepest teaching. This is not a call to be weak. It is a completely different understanding of what strength means. True strength, Lao Tzu is saying, is not the ability to resist force. It is the ability to yield to force without breaking, to absorb, to adapt, to flow around obstacles rather than crashing into them. Think of a great martial artist, not the one who meets force with greater force, but the one who steps aside, who redirects the opponent's energy, who uses the other person's momentum against them. This is the physical expression of the Tao Te Ching's philosophy. Tai Chi, which was born directly from Taoist principles, is built entirely on this idea: softness as power. And there is a verse that captures this with extraordinary beauty. Under heaven, nothing is more soft and yielding than water. Yet for attacking the hard and strong, nothing can surpass it. Nothing can take its place. The weak overcomes the strong. The soft overcomes the hard. Everyone in the world knows this,
yet no one can put it into practice. Everyone knows it, yet no one practices it. There is something almost humorous in Lao Tzu's tone here, a gentle exasperation. He is pointing at the most obvious truth in the world, a truth that is demonstrated every time rain falls on rock, every time a river curves around a stone, every time a blade of grass pushes through a crack in concrete. And still, we choose hardness, we choose force, we choose to fight the current rather than flow with it. There is a Taoist parable about an empty boat. Imagine you're crossing a river and another boat comes drifting toward you out of the mist. If you see that the boat is empty, just a vessel that slipped its moorings, you will not become angry. You will simply push it aside. But if you see a person sitting in that boat, someone who should be steering clear, then everything changes. You shout, you curse, your face reddens. The situation is identical, the same boat, the same collision course. The only difference is whether there is someone to blame. The teaching is this: if you can empty your own boat while crossing the river of the world, no one will oppose you. No one will seek to harm you. Softness, emptiness, the willingness not to push back. Tonight, let yourself be water. Let the thoughts come and go without resisting them. Let the tension in your body dissolve, not by fighting it, but by simply not holding on to it. The soft overcomes the hard, and sleep, when it comes, will come the way dawn comes, not because you forced it, but because you stopped standing in its way. There is a chapter in the Tao Te Ching that reads almost like a meditation instruction, like a guide for exactly this kind of night. Attain the utmost emptiness, Lao Tzu wrote. Hold firm to the basis of stillness. The 10,000 things arise together, and I watch their return. All things flourish and grow, and then each returns to the root. Returning to the root is called stillness. Stillness is called returning to destiny. Returning to destiny is called the eternal. To know the eternal is called enlightenment. Another translator heard these same words differently. Reach the heights of emptiness, plumb the depths of stillness. The myriad creatures all rise together, and I watch their return. The teeming creatures all return to their separate roots. Returning to one's roots is known as stillness. The 10,000 things. In Chinese philosophy, this phrase means everything that exists, every leaf, every stone, every cloud and river and grain of sand, every person, every thought, every civilization that has ever risen and fallen. And Lao Tzu says they all return. They arise, they flourish, they grow, and then they return to where they came from, like a wave that rises from the ocean, holds its shape for a moment, and then dissolves back into the sea, like a breath that fills your lungs, pauses, and then releases, like a day that begins with dawn, fills with light and activity and noise, and then returns to darkness and silence. The Chinese character for this returning is full. It literally means return or turning back, and it represents one of the most fundamental principles in Taoist thought. Nothing in nature moves in a straight line forever. The sun rises and sets. The tides come in and go out. The seasons cycle from spring to summer, to fall, to winter, and back again. Leaves grow from a tree, fall to the ground, decompose, and become the soil from which the same tree draws nourishment. Return is the movement of the Tao, he wrote in another chapter. Yielding is the way of the Tao. All things under heaven are born of being. Being is born of non-being. This is not a sorrowful observation. There is no grief in these words. Lao Tzu is describing the most fundamental rhythm of the universe, and he finds it beautiful. He finds it reassuring, because if everything returns, then nothing is truly lost. The flower that wilts in autumn will bloom again in spring. The river that empties into the sea will be drawn up into clouds and fall again as rain upon the mountains. Born of non-being, things come from nothing and return to nothing and come from nothing again. It is the great pulse, the cosmic heartbeat. And every night when you close your eyes, you participate in it. You return. You let go of the day, of your name, of your plans and worries, and you dissolve into sleep the way a river dissolves into the sea. And there is a line about this, perhaps the most consoling in all of world literature. He gives himself up to whatever the moment brings. He knows that he is going to die, and he has nothing left to hold on to. No illusions in his mind, no resistances in his body. He holds nothing back from life. Therefore he is ready for death, as a man is ready for sleep after a good day's work. Death as falling asleep after a good day's work. Not a catastrophe to be feared, but a natural rest after a natural effort. And every morning you arise again, refreshed, renewed, born from non-being into being, the way the 10,000 things arise together at dawn. The ancient masters who understood this, Lao Tzu says, were not trying to enlighten the people. They were trying to return them to simplicity. For when cleverness and knowledge appeared, great pretense arose. The ancient masters kept things simple. They knew that the way forward was often the way back. And so tonight there is nothing to reach for, nothing to achieve. just the gentle movement of return, like a leaf falling from a branch, like the tide pulling back from the shore, like the breath leaving your body, slowly, easily, carrying nothing with it but the quiet certainty that it will come again. One of the most beautiful aspects of the Tao Te Ching is how it sees the divine in the ordinary. The Tao is not hidden in temples or sacred texts or the words of priests. The Tao is in everything. It is the 10,000 things and the space between them. The great Tao flows everywhere, Lao Tzu wrote, to the left and to the right. The 10,000 things depend on it for their life, and it does not turn away from them. It accomplishes its work, but does not take credit. It clothes and feeds the 10,000 things, but does not lord over them. The Tao flows everywhere. It is in the river, and in the stone the river flows around. It is in the bamboo forest, and in the wind that moves through the bamboo. It is in the mountain, and in the mist that hides the mountain. It is in you, right now, in this moment, in the air entering your lungs, and the blood moving through your veins, and the thoughts drifting through your mind. There is a verse that captures this with perfect simplicity. Something mysteriously formed, born before heaven and earth, in the silence and the void, standing alone and unchanging, ever present and in motion. Perhaps it is the mother of 10,000 things. I do not know its name. I call it Tao. If I am forced to give it a name, I call it great. Great means going on. Going on means going far. Going far means returning. Another translator heard these words this way: there is something formless and perfect before the universe was born. It is serene, empty, solitary, unchanging, infinite, eternally present. It is the mother of the universe. For lack of a better name, I call it the Tao. I do not know its name. There is something deeply moving about this admission. The author of one of the world's great philosophical texts confessing that he does not know the name of what he is writing about. He has spent 5,000 characters pointing at something, and he is honest enough to say, I do not know what it is. I just call it the Tao because I have to call it something. And then, in the same verse, he describes its movement, going on, going far, returning, like a circle, like a spiral, like the seasons turning, or the stars wheeling overhead, or the breath entering and leaving your body. The Tao is like a well, he wrote in another chapter, used but never used up. It is like the eternal void, filled with infinite possibilities. It is hidden, but always present. I don't know who gave birth to it. It is older than God." One translator heard that last line differently. "Whose child, born before the gods?" And another, "I know not whose son it is. It images the forefather of God."
Older than God. This is a line that stops the thinking mind entirely. Whatever you believe, whatever framework you use to understand the universe, the Tao was there before it, not as a deity to be worshipped, but as the ground from which all deities, all concepts, all names arise. The Tao Te Ching does not ask you to believe in anything. It does not demand faith or worship or obedience. It simply asks you to notice, to pay attention to the world as it actually is, rather than as you think it should be, to watch the way water flows, to feel the way breath moves, to observe the way all things arise, flourish, and return. And in that noticing, something shifts. The boundaries between you and the world become less rigid. The separation between the watcher and the watched begins to dissolve. You are not separate from the 10,000 things. You are one of them, arising and returning, breathing and resting, part of the great flow that has no beginning and no end. The night sky above you, if you could see it, is the same sky that Lao Tzu saw, the same stars, the same darkness between them, the same silence holding everything. And the Tao that moved through the world 2,000 years ago moves through it still, unchanged, unhurried, as close as your next breath. Lao Tzu had radical ideas about leadership. In an age of warlords and tyrants, in a world where power meant armies and force and the ability to crush your enemies, he proposed something that must have seemed absurd. The best leader, he said, is the one who does almost nothing. The best rulers are those whose existence is barely known by the people, he wrote. The next best are loved and praised. The next are feared, and the worst are despised. When the best ruler's work is done, the people all say, "We did it ourselves." We did it ourselves. The ultimate compliment to a leader. Not that they were powerful, not that they were brilliant, not that they were loved or feared or obeyed, but that they were so light in their touch, so aligned with the natural flow of things, that the people never felt led at all. This is Wu Wei applied to governance, and it is as relevant today as it was in the Warring States period. Think of the best teacher you ever had. Chances are they did not lecture you into understanding. They created the conditions for you to discover things yourself. They asked the right questions. They pointed in the right direction, and then they stepped back and let you learn.
Or think of the best manager you ever worked for. They probably did not micromanage. They did not hover. They trusted you. They gave you space. And in that space, you found your own way to excellence. Lao Tzu believed that the same principle applied to entire nations. A country governed with too many laws becomes a country of criminals. A country governed with too much control becomes a country of rebels. But a country governed with lightness and trust becomes a country of people who govern themselves. Governing a great state, he wrote, is like cooking a small fish. Fry a small fish and do not poke at it. Too much handling and the fish falls apart. There is a deeper teaching here about the nature of virtue itself. Lao Tzu describes a remarkable cascade. When the Tao is lost, there is virtue. When virtue is lost, there is benevolence. When benevolence is lost, there is righteousness. When righteousness is lost, there are rites and rituals. This is a map of how things fall apart. In the beginning, people simply lived in harmony with the way things are. No one needed to talk about virtue because everyone embodied it. But when that natural harmony was lost, people had to consciously try to be good. When even that conscious effort faded, they settled for occasional acts of kindness. When kindness dried up, they turned to rules. And when the rules lost their grip, all that remained were empty ceremonies, the hollow forms of a goodness long since departed. A man of the highest virtue does not keep to virtue, Lao Tzu says, and that is why he has virtue. A man of the lowest virtue never strays from virtue, and that is why he is without virtue. The person who is constantly monitoring her own goodness, making sure everyone sees her virtue, has already lost the real thing. True goodness is unself-conscious. It flows naturally, the way water flows downhill. There is wisdom here for more than just rulers. There is wisdom for anyone who has ever tried too hard to control an outcome, who has worried so much about getting something right that they made it worse, who has poked and prodded and adjusted until the small fish fell apart in the pan. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is nothing. Sometimes the most powerful act is to step back, to trust the process, to let things unfold at their own pace, in their own way, according to their own nature. The Tao nourishes all things, Lao Tzu wrote. It gives them life without possessing them. It helps them grow without demanding gratitude. It guides them without controlling them. This is called the mysterious virtue. And tonight, there is nothing that needs your guidance or control. The world will keep turning without your attention. Your heart will keep beating without your supervision. Your breath will keep flowing without your effort. You can let go of the reins and trust the horse to find its way home. The Tao Te Ching is one of the shortest great books ever written. In its original Chinese, it is approximately 5,000 characters. You could write it on a single long scroll. You could read it aloud in about an hour. And yet, people have spent lifetimes trying to understand it. Part of its mystery is its brevity. Lao Tzu says just enough and no more. He does not explain. He does not argue. He does not defend his positions or address his critics. He simply states, in the simplest possible language, what he sees, and then he moves on. This is deliberate. Those who know do not speak, he wrote. Those who speak do not know. Block the passages, shut the doors, blunt the sharpness, untangle the knots, soften the glare, settle the dust. This is called the mysterious union. Those who know do not speak, and yet he wrote a book. This is the great paradox at the heart of the Tao Te Ching. The author who says that Tao cannot be spoken spends 5,000 characters speaking about it. The sage who says those who know keep silent breaks his silence to tell us so. But perhaps this is the point. The Tao Te Ching is not trying to capture the Tao in words. It is trying to use words to point beyond words. The way a finger points at the moon, the finger is not the moon. The words are not the Tao. They are fingers pointing at something that can only be experienced directly. The text is not built on logical arguments, but on paradoxes, metaphors, images, and contradictions. Darkness within darkness, the gateway to all understanding. He is not trying to explain the Tao the way a chemical reaction is explained. He is trying to create an experience in the reader, a moment of recognition, a sudden stillness where the thinking mind quiets down and something deeper can be felt. Look at it. Nothing to see. Call it colorless. Listen to it. Nothing to hear. Call it soundless. Reach for it. Nothing to hold. Call it intangible. These three cannot be fathomed, and so they merge into oneness. Not bright above, not dark below. Never, oh never can it be named. It reverts, it returns to unbeing. Call it the form of the unformed, the image of no image. Call it unthinkable thought. Face it, no face. Follow it, no end. And one translator added a line of extraordinary comfort. You can't know it, but you can be it, at ease in your own life. Just realize where you come from. This is the essence of wisdom. And people have been following those fingers for more than 2,000 years. The book was first translated into English in 1868. Since the 1990s, an average of nearly 5 new English translations have appeared every year. Each translator finds something different in the text. Each generation reads it through new eyes.
In 1973, archaeologists in central China opened a tomb sealed in 168 BCE. Inside, wrapped in silk, they found 2 complete copies of the Tao Te Ching. These are the Ma Wang Du texts, and they contain a remarkable surprise. In these early versions, the order of the book is reversed. The section on Te, virtue, comes before the section on Tao, the way. The De Tao Ching, rather than the Tao Te Ching. The tomb also contained exquisite lacquerware, fine silk garments, and painted silk banners depicting the journey of the soul through the afterlife. The silk manuscripts bore approximately 120,000 characters, spanning military strategy, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. 20 years later, in 1993, another discovery. Bamboo slips in a tomb at Guadian, dating to around 300 BCE, the oldest known fragments of the text. Approximately 800 bamboo slips, each the width of a chopstick and the length of a forearm, inscribed with elegant characters in black ink. The bamboo had survived more than 2,000 years in the sealed, waterlogged conditions of the tomb. But they contain only about a third of the chapters we know today. This suggests that the Tao Te Ching may not have been written by one person at one time. It may have grown, like a river, with tributaries joining from different sources over centuries. Core sayings and philosophical insights may date back to the 6th or 5th century BCE, but the text as we know it probably took shape over 2 or 3 centuries of oral transmission, editing, and compilation. And perhaps this too is perfectly Taoist, a book with no certain author, no fixed form, no single definitive version, a book that flows and changes and adapts like water, while remaining somehow always itself. There is a practice in the Taoist tradition called Zhu Wang. It means sitting and forgetting. Not sitting and thinking, not sitting and meditating on a specific object, just sitting and forgetting, letting everything go, the way a pond becomes still when you stop throwing stones into it. The character for forgetting combines heart-mind with perish. It describes a state where all sensory and conscious faculties are transcended, and only the underlying flow of the Tao is perceived. This is what the Tao Te Ching invites you to do, not to learn more, not to achieve more, not to become a better version of yourself, just to
forget, to let the accumulated weight of knowing and wanting and trying settle to the bottom like sediment in a glass of water, and to see what is left when the water clears. Imagine the physical experience, sitting on a flat stone or a woven mat at the base of a pine tree, spine erect, hands resting on the knees, the bark of the tree against your back, rough, warm, alive, the eyes half closed, not looking at anything in particular. Breathing, natural, uncontrolled, not trying to slow it or deepen it, just allowing it to find its own rhythm. The breath becoming so quiet that you cannot hear it, so subtle you cannot feel it. The body's weight settling downward, the shoulders dropping, the jaw unclenching, a gradual heaviness in the limbs that is not fatigue, but release.
A breeze touches your face. You notice it completely, the temperature, the direction, the faint scent of pine resin it carries, and then you let it go. Bird song enters your awareness. It is bright, complex, beautiful. You do not turn toward it. It passes through you like light through glass. In pursuing knowledge, one gains daily, Lao Tzu wrote. In pursuing the Tao, one loses daily. Lose and again lose until one arrives at non-action. Through non-action, nothing is left undone. One loses daily. This is such a strange instruction. We spend our entire lives gaining knowledge, gaining skills, gaining possessions, gaining followers and friends and credentials and experience. And Lao Tzu says, the path to wisdom goes in the opposite direction, not gaining, but losing, not adding, but subtracting, not filling, but emptying. What would it feel like to lose something right now? Not something precious, just a worry, a plan for tomorrow, a judgment about yourself. What if you could set it down the way you set down a heavy bag you have been carrying for too long and simply walk away? Without going out the door, he wrote, one can know the whole world. Without looking out the window, one can see the way of heaven. The further one goes, the less one knows. Therefore the sage knows without going, sees without looking, and accomplishes without acting.
Knows without going, sees without looking. These sound like riddles, but they are descriptions of a state that most people have experienced at least once, a moment of perfect clarity, when the noise stops and the striving stops, and you simply see the way the world actually is, not as a problem to be solved or a territory to be conquered, but as something luminous and complete and unspeakably beautiful. Imagine a temple courtyard at night. The last bell sounded hours ago. The courtyard is paved in moonlight. Every stone, every tile, every leaf picked out in silver and black. A pond sits in the center, a dark mirror. The moon rests in its center, round and white and perfect. A carp moves beneath the surface, a slow golden shadow, and the moon shivers into 1,000 fragments, then slowly reassembles. Wind chimes stir on the eaves, a soft, random cascade of bright notes, then silence. The scent of sandalwood drifts from the main hall, residual, ghostly, hours old. Somewhere in the monastery someone is awake, sitting in stillness, forgetting everything. The moonlight falls on still water, and the water does not try to hold the light. It simply reflects it, perfectly, effortlessly. And the moment you try to grab the reflection, the water ripples and the image dissolves. This is why Lao Tzu says so little. This is why the Tao Te Ching is only 5,000 characters, because the thing it points to cannot be found by reading more words. It can only be found by putting the book down, closing your eyes, and letting the water of the mind grow still. And so we come to the end, though in the Tao Te Ching there are no real endings, only returns. The last chapter of the book is the shortest and perhaps the most tender. True words are not beautiful, Lao Tzu wrote. Beautiful words are not true. The good are not argumentative. The argumentative are not good. The wise are not learned. The learned are not wise. The sage does not hoard. The more he does for others, the more he has. The more he gives to others, the greater his abundance. The Tao of heaven benefits and does not harm. The Tao of the sage acts and does not contend. Benefits and does not harm, acts and does not contend. These are the last words of one of the greatest books ever written, and they are so simple that a child could understand them. Help, do not harm. Give, do not hoard. Act, do not fight. There is a parable told for more than 2,000 years across East Asia about an old man who lived near the northern border of China. One day his horse ran away into the barbarian grasslands. His neighbors came to offer sympathy. "What terrible luck," they said. The old man looked at them calmly. "Who knows?" he said. "Who knows if this is bad luck or good luck?" Months later the horse came home, bringing a herd of fine wild horses with it. The neighbors rushed over. "What wonderful fortune!" they exclaimed. The old man said, "Who knows?" His son, riding one of the wild horses, was thrown and broke his leg. The neighbors returned with sympathy.
What a tragedy! The old man said, "Who knows?" Then the barbarian armies invaded. Every able-bodied young man was conscripted to fight. 9 out of 10 were killed. But the old man's son, with his broken leg, could not be drafted. Father and son survived together. Who knows? In those 2 small words lay the entire philosophy of the Tao. The recognition that the human mind, with its desperate need to label and judge, cannot see the full picture. The river of cause and effect flows far beyond what any single moment reveals. Good luck and bad luck create each other, and it is difficult to foresee their change. The transformations are without end, and their depth cannot be measured. I have just 3 things to teach, Lao Tzu wrote in another chapter: simplicity, patience, compassion. These 3 are your greatest treasures. Simple in actions and in thoughts, you return to the source of being. Patient with both friends and enemies, you accord with the way things are. Compassionate towards yourself, you reconcile all beings in the world. 3 treasures. Not a library of rules, not a system of rituals, not a hierarchy of duties. Just 3 simple things. And tonight, you need only the second one: patience. The patience to let the mud settle. The patience to let the water clear. The patience to let sleep find you in its own time. 5,000 characters, written at a mountain pass by an old man on a water buffalo more than 2,000 years ago. And still, tonight, they reach you. Still they carry the same quiet power, the same invitation to let go, the same gentle reminder that the Tao which can be spoken is not the true Tao, but that the silence after the words have ended might be. The water buffalo is walking. The purple cloud is drifting. The gatekeeper stands at the pass, holding his bundle of bamboo strips, watching the old man disappear into the mountains. The limestone walls of the pass emerge in the last light. The yellow river gleams below like hammered bronze. A bird calls, a single clear note, and the echo returns from the cliff walls, doubled and softer. And you are already where you need to be. The valley spirit holds you. The water flows around you. The 10,000 things arise and return in the great slow breathing of the world. There is nothing more to say. There is nothing more to do.
The uncarved block rests in its natural state. The river finds the sea without a map, and sleep, like the Tao itself, comes not because you chase it, but because you stop running. The old master smiles, the water buffalo walks on, and the silence, the beautiful ancient silence, gathers around you like mist on a mountain and holds you gently all through the night.